E.T. here. The date, February 24, 1897. The location is a training camp outside of Carson City in Nevada, and that's where a future heavyweight champion begins a sparring session with the current champion. The question for you is, are the accounts of these sessions true or false? Here are Jim Corbett, since 1892 world heavyweight champion. He's 30. And this is James J. Jeffries, age 21. He has 4 pro boxing bouts behind him, and he's here for a sparring session with Corbett, who will defend his title months later, I think it was March 17 of 97, against Bob Fitzsimmons. And this here is William Randolph Hearst, newspaper magnate. He owns a chain of papers around the U.S., including the very popular New York Journal and San Francisco Examiner, both having paid, this is important, both having paid for exclusive coverage of the champion's training. Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer are in the late 1890s in a circulation battle, and they're willing to stretch the truth to that end. For example, in 1898, Hearst published a drawing, and it was first in the New York Journal and then in virtually other paper around the country. It's a drawing by Frederick Remington, later a very famous artist, and it's of a woman. She's standing on the deck of a Spanish ship, you can see it here, being leered at by Spanish officers. You can see she's naked. Well, this scene never happened, but it did hasten the U.S. government to declare war against Spain. That was in April of 1898. It's about a year after Hearst may have lied about another war, that sparring session between Corbett and Jeffries. The sparring began at Corbett's camp outside Carson City in Nevada. Young Jeffries is a boilermaker by trade. He wants to make some money, so he accepts an offer to go spar with the reigning champ. The champ has heard that the inexperienced Jeffries was very strong and could both give and take a punch. Jeffries arrived at the camp on February 24 of 97. That's about a month before Corbett defends his title against Fitzsimmons. The sparring began the next day, and it's recorded by the New York Journal. It printed that Corbett, after allowing Jeffries to bore in and throw but never land punches, infused more ginger into his defense, and he began to attack the man, Jeffries, before him. He knocked Jeffries' left swings away and brought a left around on Jeffries' ear. When Jeffries lashed at his ribs with his right hand, Corbett steadied him with straight lefts to his face. Then Jeffries stood away and sparred for an opening, but Corbett feinted in such a manner as to bewilder the big novice. Unquote. This Hearst-owned newspaper account sounds reasonable, considering that Jeffries, barely out of his teens, with only 4 pro fights, would be unlikely to handle the overall ringmanship of the heavyweight champion, despite Jeffries' advantage in age, weight, and power. But what Hearst reporters from the Examiner and the New York Journal wrote about Corbett's February 27, 1897 session with Jeffries remains today the subject of a lot of debate, and for good reason. First, a bit of history. In March of 97, when Corbett defended his title, just weeks after sparring with Jeffries, and almost 5 years had elapsed since he took the title from John L. Sullivan, during which time Corbett defended that title only twice, the last a draw against Tom Sharkey, which many believed Sharkey won. Corbett, like Sullivan before him, spent his time cashing in on his fame, coaching at San Francisco's Olympic Club, showbiz stuff. Now that's a negative for any fighter, in particular one such as Corbett, who was over 30 and depended upon his speed and agility. Here's an account in précis of how the Hearst papers, the San Francisco Examiner and New York Journal, covered the March 97 sparring session. Both Corbett and Jeffries come in with no headgear and 8-ounce gloves. The headline, by the way, read, "Corbett floors Jeffries with a right swing. Corbett informs all he'll do no tiring workout before sparring. He's going to lay it on hard and fast." Then it goes on to describe the sparring. Corbett kept drawing back to allow Jeffries' big fist to skim fast his nose, but Corbett never failed to return with counters that covered the novice's face, caused his nose and lips to trickle with blood. Jeffries was all at sea. It was like a move on a checkerboard. Corbett seesawing, the swarthy giant stepping side to side, intent on preventing the champion's escape. Corbett then surprised Jeffries by taking a stand. He dodged a right, then landed an uppercut to the jaw that caused the big fellow to flop onto his knees, face against Corbett's stomach. The champion then placed the palms of his hands to the sides of Jeffries' head and steadied him, helped him up to his feet, and then the session was over. The Examiner and Journal claimed that Jeffries had this to say about that session later, and I'm quoting the paper, supposedly quoting Jeffries. "Oh, Corbett's an awful hitter, isn't he? I knew about his cleverness before I came here, but they told me that he hadn't a punch that would hurt. I know different now. I was never slugged like that before in my life. Well, I was not completely out, but I was so close to it that there was no fun in it. My knees struck the floor, and I had pins and needles all over me. I hope to learn from Corbett, and that will compensate me for the hammerings I get in the future." Well, other papers depended on what Hearst reporters wrote, publicized similar accounts, but Jeffries, years later, said that he'd never been dropped in his life, and that the reporter made it all up to, provide good copy for the Hearst papers and enhance Corbett's reputation, which Hearst wanted to do, and to scare Fitzsimmons. Now, Jim Corbett, in 1900, said that the reported stories were true. He said, and I'm quoting, "Jeffries was out clean as a whistle, and it took several minutes to bring him around." So which account is true? Which is false? Weeks later, Corbett was knocked out by Fitzsimmons. That was the 14th round. And now Corbett's no longer champion. Then, a few years later, in 1900, Corbett and Jeffries are in the ring again. But this time, there's no sparring, and Jeffries is champion, Corbett the challenger. E.T.'s going to cover this epic battle later, but for now know that Corbett, having trained like a Spartan, did frustrate Jeffries for 22 rounds until Jeffries' manager demanded that he knock Corbett out or lose his title. Midway into the 23rd round, Jeffries' right hand found its mark as Corbett bounced to him from the ropes, and Corbett was counted out. E.T. has his own opinion about that late February 1897 sparring episode. You may have an opinion of your own. I'd like to hear it. Type it in the comment section below. And while you're at it, subscribe, tap the bell icon. Most importantly, tap the thumb up icon. You know the drill. Thank you.